Hi, I'm filmmaker Shuli Eshel. Stay tuned. Taped with Rabbi Doug is next.
We're gonna see Rabbi Doug. We're gonna see Rabbi Doug. We're gonna see Rabbi Doug on your TV tonight. But Daddy, I want to watch Monday Night Football.
Forget about Monday Night Football. There's no other thing we're going to watch on Monday but Rabbi Doug.
Yeah, Rabbi Doug on TV tonight. We're gonna see Rabbi Doug. Oh, everybody talk about Doug.
Shalom and welcome to Taped with Rabbi Doug. I am very happy to welcome to the show Shuli Eshel. Brucha haba'ah, welcome, and I'm happy to have you here. Shuli is a Israeli woman, 6th generation, and she is living here in Chicago now, and she's a filmmaker. And she's had many documentaries and award-winning films, including, among them, the Nahum Gutman story, The Famous Artist, which is on permanent display in Tel Aviv. Maxwell Street, A Living Memory, The Jewish Experience in Chicago, the story of Maxwell Street in Chicago, which everyone who's a Chicagoan, especially Jewish people, know very much because of the businesses of Maxwell Street and how it all moved when the University of Illinois took over the area. Also, Jewish women in American sport, settlement houses to the Olympics, and then her latest, which by the way that premiered at Spertus Museum, and her latest film, A Voice Among the Silent, The Legacy of James G. McDonald, right here, just recently released, this amazing story about James G. McDonald, who was the unknown, the famous now, because of Shuli and those like her, hero of the Holocaust. He saved hundreds, thousands of lives. Nobody knew who he was. First of all, tell us, how did you learn about James McDonald? What was your first introduction? And what made you so interested that you said, I've got to make a film about him?
Well, I was invited to a lecture at Temple Shalom here in Chicago, and I read the postcard and I saw that this man, James G. McDonald, saved many thousands of lives before and during the Holocaust, and then became the first U.S. ambassador to Israel, and I am from Israel, and I've never heard of him. So I thought, well, I have to go. This really is something I'm interested in. And I went to the lecture, and the archivist told the story of how his diaries were lost for many years, and they were only discovered in 2003.
Well, I want to pause just right here at the beginning to show you a little clip from the film, A Voice Among the Silent, The Legacy of James G. McDonald, right here on Taped with Rabbi Doug. I'm with Shuli Eshel, and we'll be right back.
Almost half of the Jewish refugees from Germany and other European countries in the first days of the Nazi terror found in Palestine refuge and hope.
The humanitarian work of James McDonald, unearthed from recently discovered diaries that filled more than 10,000 pages, shed new light on what America and the world knew about the Holocaust.
Not only do we have a hero of the Holocaust, but nobody knew about him. He had been lost to history.
McDonald was able to get a private meeting with Hitler.
Hitler tells McDonald that he will show them how to get rid of the Jews.
That's what he said to Roosevelt and Jewish leaders. So long as Hitler was in power, there was no life for the Jews.
The fact that McDonald was a Catholic, I don't think made him, the Vatican any more receptive to his viewpoint.
Here was what my father had forecast all this time, and here it was. The war had started.
He was one of Roosevelt's loyal backers who was speaking truth to power.
McDonald's ambassadorship was absolutely crucial because the relationship between the United States and Israel was not an automatic relationship. It had to be built.
McDonald actually helped to save many thousands of lives.
Welcome back. We're here on Taped with Rabbi Doug. I am here with Shuli Eshel. The piece you just saw is from A Voice Among the Silent, the legacy of James G. McDonald, who died in 1964. He was born in 1886. He actually met in 1933 face-to-face with Hitler, Yamach Shemo. They actually met face-to-face. McDonald had a mission to let the world know that Hitler was for real, what his plans were. What did he do? As you know the story so well, what did he do after his meeting with Hitler, and what was his real plan of action?
Well, his meeting with Hitler, face-to-face meeting with Hitler, changed his whole life, because he brought up the Jewish question, and at first Hitler was hesitant and didn't say that he's persecuting the Jews, but then the more McDonald brought up the subject, the more Hitler got excited and lost his cool, and he told him the whole world wants to get rid of the Jews. I'm going to show them how, and he does something like that. And McDonald walked out of that meeting totally shocked. Being an American, he was the head of the Foreign Policy Association, and when Hitler came into power, he heard the conflicting reports about the Führer, and so he went to Germany to see for himself. And a week before he met Hitler, there was the first boycott on April 1st, 1933, about closing Jewish stores and having the stormtroopers denying people going into Jewish stores and shops and so forth. So he was totally shocked. And he saw a maniac. He saw the craziness of Hitler in his eyes. And he decided at the moment he left the meeting that he has to alert and warn the whole world about Hitler's plans to annihilate the Jews.
Tell me about his first meeting with the Pope. Tell me about him going to the Pope, going to the Vatican.
Well, first of all, after he met with Hitler, he left the Foreign Policy Association, and then he became the League of Nations High Commissioner for Refugees from Germany. And in that position, he felt that he could really influence people to do something about the looming tragedy that he saw.
He felt he had influence as a politician at that point.
Well, he became the High Commissioner for Refugees, and he approached every country in the League of Nations. America was not a member of the League, but he did approach President Roosevelt 3 weeks after he met with Hitler. And then he went, as a Catholic, he thought that he would have some weight about going to the Pope. But the Pope, the Vatican signed a concordat with Hitler, and they didn't like what McDonald was telling them about protecting and saving Jewish refugees who started to leave Germany.
So this was Pope Pius XII at that time. Later on, President Truman appointed James to be the U.S. ambassador to Israel. What led to his reacquainting and build up to the President of the United States when Truman became president, that this all took place?
Well, it really started with his work as the League of Nations. As I said, the League of Nations, the High Commissioner for Jewish Refugees. And then after 2 years, he resigned in 1935. And then in 1938, President Roosevelt called him again to the White House, and he formed the President Advisory Committee for Political Refugees to prepare for the conference in France, and which was a big failure, and the Avian Conference to try to save especially Jewish refugees, as my film shows. And then after that event that didn't go very well, there was Kristallnacht, and McDonald convened his advisory committee and tried to help, and he saw that Roosevelt really was not doing anything to try and save the Jews of Europe.
Well, we've said for years if Roosevelt had bombed the tracks and stopped the deportation into concentration camps, that it would have saved thousands of lives, and he didn't do it.
Right, but the importance of this documentary and why it's so important is because it's based on McDonald's diaries. So it's not something that we read somewhere or we heard. He kept meticulous diaries that he kept all the conversation he had with all the leaders of the free world. And so that was a wealth of information. And when they were discovered in 2003, they were brought to the U.S. Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C., and they went absolutely berserk because they couldn't believe that there was this
Thousands of pages.
10,000 pages about this era from 1933 through the Holocaust and beyond. So that was a treasure that they couldn't forego.
Now these were found after 1964, after his death?
2003.
2003. Where were they? Who found them, and how did they come about? His diaries with all these stories and events.
After he became the first U.S. ambassador to Israel, he he resigned in 1951, and then he hired Thomas Sugru to write his memoirs, and it's called My Mission in Israel. And Thomas Sugru asked Mr. McDonald if he can give him examples of, because he told him that he kept meticulous diaries, which he never thought of publishing. And he brought him about 500 pages, of course, the most important ones, that he met with Hitler and with the Pope and with Mussolini and all the Jewish leaders all over the world in South America and so forth. And Mr. Sugru passed away, and his daughter cleaned the basement, and she came across these pages, and she started reading, and she said, "Oh my God, this man continuously met with President Roosevelt, trying to warn him of the looming tragedy and the coming Holocaust, and of course was ignored and not really taken seriously. And then the diaries were discovered, and so once they were brought to the U.S. Holocaust Museum, they were published, and now they're published by Indiana University Press in association with the U.S. Holocaust Museum.
Amazing. Now McDonald's daughter is still alive.
Yes.
And I know that you interviewed her and had her in the film. Did she have any idea of the depth of his work towards these goals?
Yes, she did, but the missing pages of those diaries were crucial for anybody to want to publish. And by the way, McDonald had two daughters, Janet Barrett and McDonald, and Barbara McDonald Stewart. They're both interviewed in the film. The older daughter was 10 years older, and she passed away 2 months after I interviewed her. Yeah, I was very happy that I got her into the film.
Sure.
Bobby McDonald Stewart, she became a historian, and she typed out all the pages that she had of the diaries, but there were a lot of pages missing, and she couldn't publish them because those pages were missing. And then when they were discovered in 2003, she was thrilled, and she donated them actually to the U.S. Holocaust Museum on condition that they would publish her father's diaries.
Now he's one of the righteous Gentiles, as he's known. Tell me how did James get the notoriety of saving lives? Where is it, and what did he do that people say he actually saved lives with what he did? What were those things that brought him to light as besides being a voice of the silent as he is among the silent? How did he physically? What the things did he do physically that his connections and things that helped save lives?
Right. Well, you'll have to see the film
of course.
To see all the details, but the interesting thing is, as High Commissioner for Refugees, he saved a lot of lives because he was trying to get people to get visas and so forth and get them safe havens. And he went to South America and to Bolivia and to all these other countries to try and find places where the Jews could go to. in addition to Palestine, of course. But then, when he became the President Advisory Committee for Refugees, he also got visas and helped all the, the problem was that the State Department was very anti-Semitic, and every time he tried to do something, there were obstacles in the way. And
such as, we've reached our limit of refugees, we're not going to let them in, and so on and so forth.
Well, it was more than that, because in 1941, President Roosevelt appointed Breckinridge Long to be the head of the visa division, and as a result of that, thousands and thousands of people who applied for visa to enter the United States just before the real mass murder happened in all the concentration camps were turned away, and President Roosevelt knew about it and did nothing to change that. And in fact, it was his friend who was the head of the visa division, and it's very, very tragic because you'll see in the film how many times he was turned down, and he was not deterred. He was totally committed to trying to say, because he believed in the right of every human person to live a full life regardless of religion and color and ethnicity. And I would add gender in my case because I'm a feminist. So people ask me, why did you make a film about James McDonald? I said, well, this is a story that has to be told to the whole world. And this is an amazing story that the younger people should see and learn that you have to speak up when you're confronted with evil.
So you mentioned, now you grew up in Israel, and you were a young girl when he was ambassador, and you never even heard of him. What brought him to light to you as a filmmaker that you wanted to delve into his story, and all the research you had to do, the people you had to find, the information you had to dig out and bring together to do a documentary about him? What made you, what lit your candle? To get you into that?
Yeah, well, it's a good question. But when I went to the lecture, there were two people sitting next to me, and they had the first two volumes. Now the third one came out. One is Advocate for the Doomed, and the other one is Refugees and Rescue. And they were waving those diaries, and they said, "Oh my God, you have no idea what a treasure his diaries are." And I thought, my God, they were lost and they were found in 2003. And as a result, up until then, people never heard of his name. And he laid down the foundation of American-Israel relationship, my country. And here is a hero that nobody had heard about. And somebody has to tell his story. And I went to the archivist and I said, has anybody made a documentary about this man? And he said, as far as I know, no one. Now, the woman who was sitting next to me, so I told her I was a filmmaker, and she said she knew the granddaughter of McDonald. And I said, well, would you introduce me to the McDonald family? I would like to make a film about this man. And it took a whole year, and as a filmmaker, I'm very persistent, as you can tell, and I almost gave up because the last time I sent a long email to the granddaughter, and I didn't hear back, I called Heidi. Heidi Cantor is also the woman who was sitting next to me at the lecture, became my associate producer. So as I said, Heidi, Cynthia Barrett hasn't responded. She said, well, I wouldn't badger them. If she didn't answer me, that means that the family is not interested. But me being Shuli, I put down the phone and I thought to myself, you know what, Shuli, one more time, I'm going to try. And I sent her a short email with the letter below. I said, I'm still very eager and interested in doing a film about, a documentary about your grandfather. Please let me know if the family is really interested still. 2 hours later, I get an email. This is my aunt's phone number. This is her email. Please contact her right away.
Oh, that's so cool. That's so great. That is so great. We are here on Taped with Rabbi Doug. I am here with Shuli Eshel. She has her new documentary out now, A Voice Among the Silent, The Legacy of James G. McDonald. And that's what we've been talking about. And we're going to talk more about it, so stay with us. We'll be right back.
Nobody likes me. Nobody.
Maybe it's because I like to attack people. Men, women, kids. I can reduce them to weak, stammering, confused, scared imitations of their former selves. If they don't stop me, I just might leave them that way for life. I am a stroke.
Learn to recognize a stroke and act quickly. Time lost is brain lost.
I'm author Ruth Gruber, and you're watching Taped with Rabbi Doug.
Welcome back. I am here with Shuli Eshel. Shuli, I want to go away from what we're talking about right now just for a moment to talk about you. How did you get into filmmaking? What was your introduction to filmmaking? And, you know, your first 3 films before this, how did they come about and what was your interest?
Well, as I said, I'm 6th generation Israeli, born in Jerusalem, and when I graduated from Tel Aviv University, I saw an ad as an assistant director for a theater, the Bimot Theater in Tel Aviv, and I went and I auditioned for that job, and there were 60 young women there, and I got the job, believe it or not. And the theater really fascinated me. I loved the actors, the scene, the script, the music, the set design, everything was so fascinating to me. And I said, I know, this is what I want to do. After working at the theater for a year, I said, well, since I don't have theatrical background, I'm going to go and learn filmmaking, because filmmaking is, half of it is technical, and the other half is if you have a talent, and hopefully I have a talent to tell stories. So I wanted to go to a film school in Israel, and in that year there were no film schools in Israel. And so I went to the British Council, and my mother was living in London, and I looked for film schools, and I applied for a couple of film schools in London, and I was accepted, and I went to London and studied film and television.
Wow. And where'd you go from there?
From there, I went back to Israel, and I started working for Israeli television. And
Channel 2?
There was only one channel at the time when I started. And I was production assistant. They don't let you be a director right away. Obviously, for I think it was about a year and a half, a production assistant. And then I said, well, I'm ready to make my own film. So I actually left the television and I worked as a freelance filmmaker for the Israeli television. And I started my own company and I started making films.
How did you end up in Chicago?
That's a good story. My best girlfriend lives in Chicago in Highland Park, Rosie Harrell, and she invited me to come. I was staying with my ex-husband in New York, New Jersey, and then New York. And we came, and I kind of fell in love with Chicago. I thought it's a really neat town, and my girlfriend Rosie said, why don't you stay? This is a really good town. In New York, the competition is much, much harder, and here you can build a nice career for yourself. And I decided to do that. I really fell in love with Chicago, but in the meantime, my husband was not happy here, and we got divorced, and he went back to Israel, and I stayed.
Wow, wow, wow.
Yeah.
So,
and I was teaching my first job was teaching at Columbia College filmmaking.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
In Chicago.
So there you go.
Yeah.
So you really jumped right in Chicago to move into Chicago life, because a lot of the people in my business I didn't myself, but went to Columbia to get into TV and film. Just an amazing story. We have a few minutes left. What do you think was the most exciting part of James G. McDonald's life? What do you think that you pulled out from all of your research and put together in the film and in your own heart and your love for this story that was just so amazing, that made this man, the hero that he was?
Well, the two most important things for me were the fact that McDonald met with President Roosevelt 3 weeks after he met with Hitler, and told him about the looming tragedy that he foresaw, and he saw him many times thereafter. And the fact that America and the president didn't do anything to save the Jews, and that 6 million were murdered and massacred. I just couldn't get over it. And that man, McDonald, did everything he could. He wasn't deterred. You should see the film. I mean, you would say, my God, you know. And then when after the Holocaust, he became the there was the Anglo-American Committee to see what they can do about the Jews who were in the concentration camps. And there were 6 British and 6 Americans, and McDonald was one of the 6, and they wanted to send the Jews from the concentration camp back to Germany. And McDonald and only another person were the only Zionists on the whole 12-people committee who said, no, they have nowhere to go. Their homes, their families are murdered, their homes are looted. We have to send them to Palestine. But the British didn't want to, so he was very, very adamant. And that's when he met President Truman and had this big discussion with him that if he will not let those they wanted 100,000 visas to begin with, to get the Jews back to go to Palestine, he would be regarded as an anathema in the history. So anyway, so Truman remembered that big discussion, the heated fight that they had, and when in 1948 he called his chief of staff called McDonald and said, would you be the president wants you to be the representative and then the first U.S. ambassador to Israel. Would you take it? And he said, well, let me think about it. And he said, okay, you think about it. 10 minutes later, he called me back and he said, have you thought about it? And he said, I'm not canvassing anybody. The president is not canvassing anybody else. He wants you to be the first U.S. ambassador to Israel.
Wow.
And that was
how amazing.
Amazing story.
This is such an amazing story. Such an amazing story. And you're an amazing person. I just really can't thank you enough for being on the show.
Thank you.
Shuli Eshel, you will not want to miss seeing The Voice Among the Silent, The Legacy of James G. McDonald. If you want more information about it, you can email us at info@tvrabbi.com. You can see this show and shows from the past at our website, www.tvrabbi.com. Shuli Eshel, if anybody has any questions and they email them to me, I will forward them to you, and I know you'll answer them personally. The Voice Among the Silent, The Legacy of James G. McDonald, former U.S. ambassador to Israel, first U.S. ambassador to Israel. He died in 1964. His diaries were found, and the rest is history, thanks to Shuli Eshel making it public. Have you put subtitles so it can be shown in Israel and other countries?
Not yet.
Not yet, but that's a future plan.
Yes.
Well, I wish you much success with
much.
The James G. McDonald story and with all your films. I can't wait to see Maxwell Street because I love the story of Maxwell Street, and I haven't seen that film, so that's another one on my list to watch. We should.
We should do a show about the Maxwell Street living.
I'd love to do it.
Jewish experience.
I'd love to do it. And I want to thank all of you for being with us, and thank Shuli Eshel. Hope to see you next time right here on Taped with Rabbi Doug. Shalom, everyone.
Gonna see Rabbi Doug. Gonna see Rabbi Doug. Gonna see Rabbi Doug on the TV tonight.
This has been a Taped with Rabbi Doug production.